Senator Elizabeth Warren out with a new warning today. She says an economic crash is coming. She also claims she has a plan that could prevent it. In a new Medium post, the 2020 presidential contender writes, "I warned about an economic crash years before the 2008 crisis, but the people in power wouldn't listen." She goes on to add, "Now I'm seeing serious warning signs in the economy again, and I'm calling on regulators and Congress to act." The Massachusetts Democrat bases her prediction on a number of reasons, including growing household debt and corporate debt, and what she calls a manufacturing recession. Warren also faults President Trump for chaos in the form of the trade war with China, as well as his comments on Brexit. CNN's Christina Alesci joining us now from New York. Christina, Warren did get out ahead of the 2008 crisis, warning it was coming, but there's some pushback to her calculations now that perhaps she might be too alarmist. What are they?
That's right. Two things that Warren is doing here. One, really playing off the PTSD that the country suffered post-financial crisis. And number two, she's proposing some solutions that actually might create another crisis. Now, let me explain each of those. Number one, she points to several data points that say, the alarm bells should be ringing for a financial crisis. Well, one of the things that she points to is the level of corporate debt. Now, while risky loans to corporations have increased post-financial crisis, the ability for those companies to keep up with payments has also increased. So we're not seeing the kind of default rates that would be alarming at this point. Now, I'm not saying that's not a metric we should be paying attention to. All I'm saying is that Elizabeth Warren is shaping this conversation in a way that's politically convenient for her. Now, as far as her policy proposals, she is recommending lowering rents, offering affordable childcare, offering free tuition at colleges. All of that costs money, and the American public should be asking, how do you pay for it? One way would be to increase taxes. Another way is to increase government debt. This is the issue that the American people should be actually focused on, because many experts say if we don't get control of our debt over the next 10 years, we could be facing a fiscal crisis, and that would be extraordinarily harmful to our economy.
I've been here long enough to remember when politicians, sometimes in both parties, talked about the debt. It was a long time ago, though. Christina Alesci live in New York for us. Appreciate the reporting there. I don't know if they're the good old days, but they're the old days. They're the old days anyway. We'll leave it there. To Christina's point, number one, Senator Warren would push back that kind of, that the metrics used on Wall Street, the metrics used by the bankers, well, they were wrong last time. I'm right this time. I'm not smart enough to know who's right or wrong. But as she lays this out, what is her play in the primary?
I mean, this does two things, right? First of all, it undercuts Trump's economic message. I mean, the economy is doing really good right now. Everything's sort of humming along. People feel good. And for a warning that this is coming, she's trying to sort of undercut that. But in terms of the primary, again, like Christina was just laying out, this just, again, bolsters all these policy proposals she's putting out left and right. A minimum wage increase, canceling student debt, free college, childcare, and also one of her long-term pet projects, reining in Wall Street. And so this is really to her political advantage to sort of peddle this, even though, all these sort of things would cost a lot of money and increase the national debt. At
a time when you see her in a pretty fierce competition with her fellow progressive Bernie Sanders, but it's an interesting when you look into the weeds of their support, she is getting a more affluent supporters, let me put it that way, college-educated, more affluent. And is this a play for a more Sanders/Trump voter, a blue-collar person who might have still a hangover from 2008 and beyond?
Well, it seems like she's doing two things, to Rachel's point. One is focusing on the primary debate and trying to, once again, put the focus back on the things she loves talking about. It is the narrative of her entire campaign. The system is rigged. It's rigged against you. And I want to be able to have people talk about that, like all of us around this table, rather than tweets or whatever else. But the other reality is we know that the economy is the issue that writ large people are talking about as a benefit to the president. But we know a couple of things. The first is this correlation between how people feel about the economy and their partisanship. They're very closely aligned. It's very hard to separate your partisanship from your feelings about the economy. If you're a Republican, you think the economy is good. If you're a Democrat, you think it's bad. This happened under Obama too. And it's also really hard to get people to focus on the future and not the reality. Remember in 2012 when President Obama basically had to convince voters that I know the economy's not great, but it could have been so much worse, right? And that was going to be the bumper sticker in 2012. it could have been worse, which is a hard thing to sell to voters.
It's interesting, though, for different reasons. President Trump also raises the same kind of alarms in his pushing the Fed all the time, including today on Twitter, to cut rates. He wants juice in the economy heading into his re-election year, of course, doesn't want whether it's a global slowdown or anything else. And so they get there from a different direction, but the president himself warning, hey, Jerome Powell, cut rates for me, and not just once. Cut rates for me so the economy doesn't slow down going into my re-election.
Yeah, that's the whole play for Trump here is the economy. And right now for the White House, there are two kind of wild cards in the economy. One is, that they can control, sort of. One is the trade talks with China, and the other is what the Fed does. So that's why you see Trump with some pretty nuanced language on the trade talks, and why you see an aggressive push, relentless on the Fed to keep rates low, is that he believes that will keep the economy humming long enough to get them through the next 18 months here, 15
Warren
months.
also seems to really be tapping into something, it's a razor's edge argument, which is that people feel good about their current financial standing, but when they look into the future, they worry that it might not be that great. In the near future, even in the distant futures, they start to think about their kids' college education, the long-term impact of debt on their families. And so that is a real message that Democrats probably need to figure out how to tap into. The idea that the American middle class needs to feel more secure than they feel right now. Some of that is PTSD from 2008, but some of that is also because the economy is going well, but I think people feel like they have issues with debt, that the rising cost of college is unsustainable, healthcare is unsustainable. Those are real issues that they can actually message around to counter Trump's everything is great message, which, if people really were being honest, probably doesn't feel right for a lot of households.
It's one of the great questions as you watch the Democratic debates next week. How do the Democrats deal with the current statistics? Wall Street's doing good, unemployment rate is down. How do you make an economic argument against the president? That's why debates are fun.